Ghost in the Noise by Lonnie Webb. Copyright 2024. Lonnie Webb. All rights reserved. Dark skies flash with blue-green lightning in the howling winds and pelting rains of the hurricane. My name is Thibodeau Ray, a storm spotter in a tow truck as the newest blow inches by. Leather smells in my truck contrast with the cold, swampy thunderstorm odors outside. I kicked the heater on to keep the fog off the windscreen. My hands were freezing in the air blast. I hadn't noticed how tightly I must have been gripping the wheel. Hurricane storm spotting in the swamps of the South often becomes an effort to search out victims, and I suppose my nerves had gotten excitable. Spotters serve the needs called for. Admittedly, I used that as an excuse to drive when the state police closed the roads. Radars can't see below tree level, so someone has to report what the storm is doing on the ground. Drumming windshield wipers kept me company as I watched the roads for activity. The storm had turned away from my location. It had been as bad as it would get. I was now following it. My scanner crackled to life over the sound of the howling wind, startling me. "Mommy," it said. The AM light flashed while the voice spoke. It must be a wireless landline overpowering my mobile setup. Nobody but talk radio and airports use AM in this century. Odd, though. I had thought all the power was out with the rural power lines being down. "Is anyone there? I'm all alone," the voice called again, almost drowning in the hiss of static. The static continued for a long moment, tempting that more would follow. "Call Dan," I spoke into my cell phone, but all cell service was out. The towers were truly down or without power from the winds and floods. Not to worry, my handheld radio was connected to my truck antenna. I tuned up my partner on the handy talkie. "Anybody using this frequency? November 0 Tango Dan. Are you there? Over," I called. "November 0 Tango here. That you, Thibodeau? Lots of noise on the bands. I can barely make you out. Over to you." Wind blew a branch rolling across the road and continuing off the other side. I struggled to keep the truck straight in the rain. "Yes, sir. Look, I hear a transmission in AM on the scanner." My teeth chattered mildly. "I might go check it out. Over." "I'm not getting it here. You're just hearing a ghost in the noise. The static is playing tricks on you. Over." "Is anyone there?" The scanner cracked, barely audible. "I don't think it's my imagination, Dan. Sounds like she's in trouble. Over." "She," quoted Dan, "could be a siren in the noise, ah." "What gets me is the signal is coming in on the AM band," I told him. "That would have to be an air band or commercial these days. Who is it? An airplane?" Over. "I don't know. Kinda thought it was a phone at first, but it sounded like a kid. Must be close to me." "There might be money in it. Airlines pay a lot for recovery done right. Over." The scanner continued hissing on the AM band. No voice was discernible for the moment. "My radio will do AM, but I'll lose you for a while. Especially if I have to go direction finding. How's the storm look?" Over. "I only have relay info, but it looks like the worst is past. Stay to the high ground, though. A flash flood could still happen. Over," said Dan. "Copy that. I am clear," I said, letting others know I was done using the frequency. Assuming anyone was listening. "Is anyone there? It's so dark," the child's voice called. I pulled off the road and switched over to AM. "All stations, please repeat that transmission." "Hello?" cried the voice. "I didn't think anyone would ever answer me." I spoke into the mic. My name is Thibodeau. What's your situation? It's dark here and I am all alone, she said. What is your address? It was hard to see through the rain, but there were no houses in the area. I'm at the house. House? What road? I asked, making no effort to show radio etiquette. On the farm, said the crackly voice, as though any idiot could tell which farm she was talking about. I needed that idiot to navigate for me. How do I get the farm? I asked. On the farm road to the house, she said. There was a hint of sarcasm in her transmission. I opened my map. Off the road were tire shops, storage centers, and bait shops, but no residential. Any fair-sized farm should be visible since the range of the signal is too limited for my buddy to hear. My mommy likes to walk down the road when she goes to walk the swamp. How do I find your farm road? I asked with measured words. We've all heard stories of deeper-than-country folk wandering through the swamp. Of course, I haven't met anyone buck-toothed enough to fit the description. Yet. There was crackling. I wanted to get out and use my handy-talkie antenna to locate the transmission. That is, my truck insulates signals, so I put on my raincoat and hat. Unscrewing the antenna cable from my handheld, I replaced the shorter rubber ducky antenna. Then I added a gap between the fitting and the body of the radio just big enough for one thumbnail. I hopped out of the truck for better reception and said, "Talk to me. I am finding your direction, but I need you to keep talking." "What should I say?" she asked. "Tell me about the road," I said. "When do I turn off the main highway?" "There is a tractor by the bend in the road with a big tree. That tree is where the tractor was held up by a rope while men were working on it." Turning in a tight swivel, I could hear her talk when I faced the direction opposite that which the truck was facing. While she talked about trees and tractors she had seen by the road, I got back in the truck and stuck the short antenna out the window. Hastily, I turned around and drove back the way I came. She talked about a gas station and a big red gas truck. I had no idea what she was saying, but at least I had a sort of bearing. That was the summer when we bundled hay. We took the bundled hay to a hay baler, she said in that scratchy transmission. I didn't understand what she meant. Hay balers are pulled by tractors. Must be the simple error of a child. I smiled to myself when it occurred to me that she had no mic fright. The direction quickly led off to the right, so I looked for a turn. A numbered parish road went off namelessly, so I followed it for a while. The road immediately turned to gravel and ran by an old concrete slab. I almost missed it. Beside the slab was a rusted-out hulk of a wheelless tank truck. The frame was so frail it might as well have been a station wagon. This had to be the remains of a gas station, and the transmission went off behind it on a fork. This path was grassy, and the memory of ruts was no longer held by the ground here, but there was an unmistakable vehicle-wide gap in the trees. My lights picked up a dog trail leading up the dark lane. I followed that around a bend and soon passed through an open gate to an old chicken house and barn. On the other side of the road where the signal had led was a row of weeping willows dangling moss from above my head. I got out with my light and radio. The girl stopped talking, but I was going in the right direction. I found the house easy enough after peeling back the Spanish moss layers that draped around an open area like a fragmentary curtain. The faint light from the overcast moon was not strong enough to illuminate the grassy patch, so I brought up my lantern to light the way. "Can you hear me? Talk to me so I can find you." I swung the radio around at an angle in front of me. "I'm still here. It's still so dark," said the quivering voice in the noise. "Have you seen Mommy?"
She likes to go for walks in the swamp.
In the swamp? During this weather? I said with amazement. I haven't seen her. Rain was lighter now, but still falling. It rode the currents of the air and fell predestined to land on the earth at my feet. I'm close now. Keep your nerve, I said with my mind going back to my boomstick in the back of the tow truck. The strongest position was dead ahead. In the dark stood an overgrown dwelling. It was hard for me to make out where the vegetation ended and the structure began. It wasn't clear if the structure remained sound at all, but I doubted the storm had harmed it, although it made creaking noises just bearing up to the wind and rain. Louisiana swamps were notorious for consuming man-made homes, schools, and churches left abandoned. The hurricanes certainly drove people away regularly enough. Jutting up out of the ground, this stucco and clapboard Scooby-Doo house showed hints of being influenced by, not surprisingly, French architecture. The windows were so dark they looked like gaunt features more than elevations of the house. A tiny glow reflected from two upper windows that protruded from the sinking roof. The light did not come from inside, being a pale imitation of the moonlight. Combined with the belfry over the porch, it looked like the face of a skull complete with a gasping mouth. I walked away from the dilapidated front porch. It smelled of rain and rotten wood. Rickety boards dangled from above what might have been a porch swing once. In addition to the creaking sounds, it did not look safe. To the right, there was a side entrance. Beside it, an electric meter loop on the side of the house with the pitted metal lever that had been pulled down and drooped to one side. The cloth and asbestos-wrapped mains were disconnected from the house. The brownish fuse box was open, and the rusty screw-in fuse receptacles revealed power-conducting connections were long gone. I pulled gently on the screen door, but it was too much tugging the latch out of the rotted jamb. Dust and dirt fell from the frame the door sat in. The interior door was badly weathered and unlocked. The tin or bronze fittings squeaked as I eased it open. A musty, rotten wood smell rose from the inside also. Unsettling groans came from the structure. "Hello," I called out. "Anybody hear me?" Not only was there no answer, the house ceased groaning. A hand-woven bread sack mat lay beyond the door into the kitchen. I pressed my feet gently on the floor as I walked in. I could hear the wood moving against nails in the floor under my careful paces. It held me up well enough, but I confessed to a certain weakness in the knees. "Hello?" I then said into the radio. "I am in the house." "I hear you, Thibodeau," said the child's voice through my radio. "Why can't I hear you? Are you in the cellar?" I asked. "I don't think so," she said. "We don't have a cellar in the house." Looking for the signal, I waved the radio again. I moved in the strongest direction into a big room with a fireplace. Grapevines reached in from a paneless window bearing no fruit. An old piano stood against the wall opposite an infested and chewed-up couch. Stoneware crocks sat under it with no corks, empty vessels. Beyond that stood a sewing table and a large chair. On the table stood an ancient spark set. With the transmitter on my left and the receiver on my right, I leaned into the Telemco. A layer of dirt and grime clung to it, but it was clearly a 1930s contraption. Being a spark radio, it needed no electricity. I grasped the stalk of the microphone horn and said, "Radio check, can you hear me?" My own voice crackled in my radio. "I can hear you," came the child's voice from my HT. "The signal is coming from right here. Where are you? Is there another radio in the house?" "No," she said. "There is only the one radio." A bang rattled the house, and the faint moonlight was extinguished by the house shutters slamming shut. The air smelled of dirt and wet leaves. A door flew open, revealing a ragged skeletal shape of what had been a woman standing in the doorway, with moss hanging off it. Her leathery arm reached out with a meatless hand. Hollow eyes looked in my direction, putting a terrible fright in me, stifling a scream in my throat. A glimmer of light seemed to glow in the back of the skull's interior. Anything but holy glared into my face with an absence of soul. With one stride, it was upon me. I backed into the corner behind the sewing table, looking for any escape. The frail wood of the shutters now stood like iron bars in my hands, refusing to budge regardless of my desperation to open them. "Is Mommy there?" said the child. "I hear Mommy in the noise."